Welcome, and we're going to be covering news from Ukraine and the invasion from Russia and the current President Putin. So, a lot of stuff's going on right now, and I want to try to cover what I can. So, let's get into it.
But this is not the all.
I want to go over some stuff real quick. I want to play this video, and then we're going to go to some details. The chat's open, so if you have questions, please let me know. And it's pretty serious right now. We have military operations in Ukraine. We have troops already stationed in Poland, and President Biden has already issued sanctions on Russia, along with NATO issuing further sanctions. Obviously, Putin has disregarded everything in regards to NATO and President Biden. Stocks are falling. It's a unclear time right now in America. So let's figure out what's going on. Let's get some news going on here. Ukraine says right now that full-scale invasion by Russia is underway as explosions are reported across the country. This is scary times. And let me tell you, the Russian president televised a speech earlier Thursday. He said that he has ordered a special military operation into eastern Ukraine, and initially it was reported as a peacekeeping mission. However, obviously that's not what it was. It was a cover to unfold the real implementation of what Russia was planning, which was a full-scale invasion. According to AP and BBC News, explosions have been reported in multiple cities in Ukraine following Putin's announcement, and Ukraine's government confirmed a full-scale invasion of Ukraine was underway. U.S. President Joe Biden said in a statement that President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic end and loss of life and human suffering. This is terrible. Terrible times, and a very terrible, terrible way to bring a meaning to something that you want, that you could have done diplomacy. I don't know how else to say it. I'm at a loss for words. Anytime a leader decides war and loss of life is the best way to get what they want, that's when they need to be replaced. Anyways, let's watch the video here. We're going to go over breaking news currently, and ABC News is going to be covering it. Let's go.
All of the Donbass goes way out here. The rebel-held area is only about a third of the Donbass. So if he said, I need to go in and retake the Donbass, he's got some work to do in here. But again, a line from Kharkiv to Dnipro down to Kherson would give him that one-third of the country, and maybe that's enough.
And Russia seems to have struck first here. So how can Ukraine respond? Are they prepared militarily to respond to a Russian invasion?
They are much improved. The U.S. and NATO countries have been working with them to improve their military since they were whipped in 2014 by the Russians in the Crimea and in the Donbass. So they've gotten better. The problem is the Russian military has also gotten much better. Over the last 15 years or so, Mr. Putin has put a lot of money into improving the Russian military in a way that makes them a very, very capable military, once again, in sort of reflecting that past glory of the Cold War. That means that the Ukrainians, even though they sort of match up man for man on the ground, it still means that the technological advantages that the Russian army, Russian military, Russian Air Force has really is going to be no match. So will Mr. Putin be able to take large parts of Ukraine? Yes, it may take weeks, it may take months, but eventually he'll be able to do that. What he will not be able to do is be able to hold that territory. You think about it, it takes about 3 to 1 in terms of the number of troops. So if he has 150, 170,000 troops around here, if he's going to even hold this much of Ukraine, he's going to need double or triple that, and he can't afford that. he goes into an election in 2 years from now and can't have body bags coming home from some bloody occupation like he saw in Chechnya. So it's probably going to be a get in, get out. I think we heard that tonight where he says he doesn't want to hold terrain, wants to teach the government a lesson.
So listen to that right there. So they're talking about Putin wanting to take control of everything. However, that it could hurt his election, and he may not want to do that. Take in mind, this is ABC News talking about Putin, his election, and what he cares about, etc. This is all speculative. There's no confirmed yes or no as to what his true intentions are. Obviously, from the split of the USSR and initially whenever the former dictator was in charge, there was a split of the country to where Crimea became part of Ukraine. So we have to understand that they wanted to be separate from Russia. And now Putin wants to claim the territory back. And in a sense, is this right or is this wrong? Please let me know in the comments. However, I don't have a comment on, what I think it is, but at the end of the day, we have to understand what is it? Like the United States, if we was to look at this as the United States breaking it up to 13 continents again, that's not going to happen. And Russia needs to understand that they can't just go back in time and take back something that they thought was theirs, because initially it was theirs, but it's not now. And they have to understand that Ukraine, that specific place in their country, is Ukraine's. It's not Russia's. So they need to back off. They need to get their tanks out. They need to back up and stop the invasion. My opinion. However, there obviously may be some people that don't think like that. But I'm sure many Ukrainians and American Ukrainians in America feel the same way. And I agree with them. War is always the last answer. You do not bring guns and tanks and soldiers to the front line. You bring diplomacy. So why cannot we establish a means of communication to understand a common ground? I'm just asking.
What that lesson is yet to be to see.
For the Ukrainians' defense, how does the mobilization of reservists help?
Because really what they're going to have to do is fight sort of a militia, an insurgency. So remember, we saw insurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan that we had to fight. It's actually quite difficult because you have people who believe in the defense of their country, that they've been invaded by a country. They're very proud that the national spirit of Ukraine has grown since the independence in 1991 from Russia. So you have Russians invading and killing Ukrainians. And so what they're going to have to do after they eventually get overrun is to sort of go into the militias and fight a guerrilla war. And that ends up being very, very bloody, not only for the Ukrainians, but eventually for the Russians.
And Colonel, last question here. American troops are overseas right now. What kind of support could they provide Ukraine, and how will they engage?
Zero. It'll be the President Biden has made it very clear that this is not our fight. So Ukraine is not a member of NATO. It's never going to be.
So they just talked about Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and President Biden has made it very clear that this is not our fight. However, he's the one issuing national sanctions against Russia and saying that if you invade, there will be repercussions. What are your thoughts on this? Our president stated there would be repercussions. However, now he's saying there will not be. Does this worry you? It worries me, frankly. My opinion. I want to say that there are many Ukrainian Americans in the United States that feel the same way. And I would like to know that they can express that, whether it be on this channel or, through any other means. Any type of expression is welcome. It's very sad that we find ourselves in a state to where we promise things that we cannot deliver. And especially when it comes to life, eyesight, limb, that we cannot say we tried our best. I feel that sometimes maybe we overstep our boundaries. Or maybe we just over-deliver. I think that we should have everyone's best interest at heart.
Be a member of NATO. Someday maybe it'll be a member of the EU, but it is not our fight. It's not NATO's fight, but it is still very, very concerning. If you think about it, Andrew, this part of the world has a really bad track record for small world wars turning into brush fires and world wars. So it's one of these things that needs to be watched because there's a lot of historical overhang here that's quite scary.
Colonel Gander, thank you for that insight. And we'll be back after this break with more reporting from the ground in Ukraine and our team of analysts to break all of this down. Stay with us.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
It's an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, ABC News Live.
Across the Russian border in Kharkiv, which is...
Welcome back, and let's get right to that breaking news from Ukraine. Let's bring in ABC's Aaron Katersky in Lviv in the west of Ukraine. Aaron, there have already been reports of blasts to your east. What's happening there in Ukraine right now, and what are you seeing?
Well, it appears that Russian forces have struck deep into this country as something of an opening salvo, Andrew. The invasion is underway, as the Pentagon put it to our Martha Raddatz. It has started, and it started, it seems, with reports of troops coming across the Russian border in Kharkiv, which is in the east of Ukraine and the country's second largest city. And it also started with bombs dropping in Kyiv, in the capital city, as heard by our team there. Elsewhere in Ukraine, I mean, who knows? We're not sure what this full scale of the invasion is going to look like over the next several days or weeks, or how long it could last, or what President Putin's intentions are. But we know the U.S. Military is in neighboring countries now, and the Ukrainian military had said that it was bracing key members of parliament here in Ukraine that the invasion was going to include Kyiv, the capital, and at least one other major city. And if that's Kharkiv to the east, it would make sense because it is the second largest city, home to about 1.5 million people or so. And it could help President Putin, if this is his intention, try and claim the eastern third of the country, cut it off from the capital to prevent Ukrainian troops from falling back to defend it.
So, apparently, earlier Biden said that he would not entertain any type of war and that Ukraine was by themselves. However, we have troops in Poland that is confirmed, and other places unconfirmed that our troops are currently at United States forces. However, there is no confirmed partnership with Ukraine. And President Biden wants to declare that we have no stronghold or affiliation with the current invasion. And it's just hard sometimes to think and recollect that we are a nation that supports free speech, freedom to be who you are, and support those who support us. And the biggest thing, I think, honestly, is that Ukraine is not part of NATO. So Ukraine not being part of NATO apparently is a big decision factor here. And I honestly don't think that should be that. Any nation that expresses or extends the right flag of, hey, help, I'm just being here and I'm being invaded. I'm a country that has not done no wrong. I believe they should be warranted help. I don't think that they should have to pay initially to be funded to stay alive. This is my expression, my thought process. America has many people in it that lives off of support. And if they had to sell themselves on why they should be alive, then we would not be America. Therefore, America would not be America if we cannot support nations that wish to be independent. This is a sad time in our nation. This is a sad time in the Republic of all of the world. Ukraine has always been a peaceful nation that I remember. Tell me I'm wrong. They are just trying to make it. But they have tanks rolling across their fields, their lands. Unwelcome. Two independent nations, Crimea was a piece of Russia back in the USSR. Amongst the time during World War II, when war was rampant and Germany was at the front. However, they broke free from it. They made their own nation. And now, Putin looks back on history and says, this is my nation. I will claim it. By war, by blood, by force. Obviously, there was a think tank behind this. There was. And many people were involved. However, Ukraine is the one paying the price. And there's not enough retribution to cover the lives that will be lost due to Putin's reckless disregard for freedom. Let's continue the breaking news from ABC News.
Let's go back to how this all started. It was a slow build up to a possible attack. When Ukrainian people prepared for this?
Well, they had not necessarily been put on a war footing, but today a tone changed as President Zelensky started calling up reservists, 36,000 of them, to reinforce the Ukrainian military. He also got on the phone with world leaders, President Biden included in recent days, appealing for financial support and other support for the Ukrainian military. And the country's National Security Council called for a state of emergency, and that's to allow authorities to impose curfews or limit transport, do other things to try and get ahead of any threats that may arise. And that was a real signal that they thought something was coming. And then the Ukrainian military began to brief members of parliament, telling them that an invasion was coming and coming soon, and preparing them that it was going to be much bigger than the fighting that we've seen in this country for the last 8 years in eastern Ukraine.
And Aaron, you mentioned the calling up of reservists. How else has the country ensured that its people are going to be safe?
Well, they have certainly been well aware of the warnings from the United States and its European partners, Andrew. They know what the dire warnings have sort of built up. And although there's really been no outward sign of panic here, we know that in more recent days, in talking to people, they've begun to sense that something was up, and privately may have begun to make plans. I visited a gun shop here in Lviv, and the manager was telling me that he's had a good deal of interest in recent days, people coming in wanting to know about firearms for self-defense or to protect their families. We've also heard of Ukrainians taking up arms in preparation to fight the Russians, should it come to that. There's a good sense of patriotism here. It's a country of 40 million people, and they are not going to go down without a fight. As President Zelensky had said, the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian military are ready for whatever Vladimir Putin may have in store.
And now that a Russian invasion appears to be underway, have there been any evacuations?
We haven't really heard of any, and it seems as if that this feared mass exodus to Poland may not have started, but it's very early in this conflict. And indeed, the busier direction at the crossing with Poland seemed to be the other way, as Ukrainians wanted to come back to their country, even knowing that something may be afoot. President Zelensky made a last-ditch appeal to try and avoid hostilities. He did it in Russian to Russians, well aware that his voice may never have been heard in Russia proper, but he wanted to get a message out to say that Ukraine wants peace, that it is not the aggressor that it has been portrayed in Russia in recent days. And he was hoping to sort of mobilize Russian support against what President Putin is doing, even though he undoubtedly knew it would fall on deaf ears.
And Ukraine's president made a plea for peace today, even saying that he tried to call Putin and was met with silence. How have the Ukrainian people reacted to their leadership in this trying time?
You know, I think there's been something of a rallying around Zelensky. He is the democratically elected leader, and although he's a political novice, having come from the world of entertainment, he's been doing all of the things a president can do. He's been urging calm, and indeed we haven't seen any signs of anything but in the last more recent hours, he has started to make his people aware of perhaps what's to come. And now our teams have heard the explosions in the capital of Kyiv. Zelensky has been urged by the United States to leave the capital for his own safety, but we believe he is still there, although he has sent parliamentarians back to their constituencies to be with the people.
Aaron, thank you, and be safe. Now, there will no doubt be economic impacts from what's happening overseas tonight, globally and here in the United States. So we turn to ABC's Elizabeth Schulze for more. Elizabeth, there have already been sanctions announced. Has the White House indicated yet how they will respond to this particular escalation?
Well, Andrew, the White House has released a statement from President Biden that called this an unprovoked and unjustified attack on Ukraine and vowing that the world will hold Russia accountable. So what that will look like is these severe economic penalties that they have been teeing up in case this type of invasion happens. We do know that so far the sanctions have been pretty targeted, focused on a few Russian banks, on the financial system, on oligarchs. This next round, the White House has said, will be coordinated again with its allies and could include broader measures, things like export controls, which would make it difficult for Russia to get access to critical technologies. They're talking about targeting bigger banks that could affect more Russian households, the broader Russian economy, and the possibility of personal sanctions on President Putin hasn't been completely ruled out. You know, ultimately, the attempt here is to show that we have a lot of measures that we can still take that will severely cripple the economy. The U.S. says it's prepared to do this with its allies, and President Biden is expected to make this announcement in a public address tomorrow, Andrew.
And how much could tonight's attack further rock the financial markets?
Well, if there's one thing the stock market doesn't like, it's uncertainty, and this is a big dose of it. We are already seeing stock market futures trade lower, and those losses have accelerated as the scope of this has become more clear. You know, one of the biggest questions for traders is how long is this going to last? And of course, we don't know that at this point. So a lot of traders tell me that you can expect very choppy and bumpy trading in the coming days, maybe weeks, as we try to kind of look at how this is going to play out. Some of those safe haven assets like gold, where a lot of investors go when times of uncertainty, are trading higher. And of course, oil prices are trading higher now in the wake of this announcement. That is one of the key things we're watching when it comes to the effects on the Russian economy and on the overall economy too.
And this could have a real and immediate impact on Americans. We're already seeing a lot of pain at the
Okay, so
how high it could get.
It's already been made clear that this invasion has took a clear toll on the stock market. And I will tell you one, for someone that's an investor, that yes, I have seen thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars disappear within the last few hours of this invasion. And it's apparent that history shows, and I will tell you this, do your own research, DYOR, okay, that markets rebound. Not financial advice, but they do rebound after invasions. Look at the Gulf War. Look at Vietnam, Afghanistan. They have all rebounded. Over 100% to 200% returns. Question is, who's a seller? Who's a buyer? Anyone that sells, there's a buyer. That's what you have to understand. When the market drops, there's always someone ready to pick it up. And I, for one, am a picker-upper, not a dropper. Because if I buy, I'm ready to buy more. Pentagon officials say that Russian invasion of Ukraine underway. There's already been an official address saying that's happening. However, there's been a lot of disinformation saying that it's a peacekeeping mission or that they're not sure. I don't understand why it's so hard to have this type of information. We're the United States government. We should know everything going on. Period.
Gas and energy prices go from here, and are these price hikes expected to last?
This is the question. We are seeing, Andrew, already Brent crude oil prices close to $100 a barrel in the wake of this news tonight. That means that the price that you are going to pay at the gas pump could eventually go higher with crude oil prices going higher. So, remember, Russia is the third largest producer, exporter of crude oil in the world, the second largest exporter of natural gas. A lot of this is going to mean that European consumers pay higher prices at the pump or in their heating bills, especially if what Russia decides to do is retaliate in response to these sanctions that we expect to be announced by the U.S. and by its allies. If Russia then decides to pull back supply from the market to further disrupt the oil market, that could mean that there's more disruption for consumers here, and that could result in higher prices. We've already seen prices go up so much. Gas prices are up 20 cents for the national average gallon of gas here in the U.S., and a lot of analysts say you can expect to see $4 gallon of gas if we continue to see these oil prices trending higher, Andrew.
And Elizabeth, is there anything the Biden administration can do to try to mitigate the economic fallout here in the U.S.?
This is a message that the White House has been trying to send, saying we understand that Americans will bear some of the pain of these measures that we are imposing. And part of that is the cost of democracy, they say. But on the other hand, inflation is already a problem here in the U.S. It's already pinching Americans. So they've tried to say we're making a coordinated effort, the U.S. with other countries around the world, to stock up on oil reserves in case Russia does decide to pull back, to stock up on natural gas reserves, to try to say we are prepared, we have enough ready to go to subvert some of the shocks that could be in place here in the market. At the same time, the U.S. isn't ruling out other options like releasing oil from its strategic petroleum reserve. This is something that it did earlier this year when we saw gas prices going up. How much of an effect that will have for the average person going to fill up at the tank, not very clear at this point. And ultimately, this is a global market. So when there are big shocks and big disruptions like this, it does trickle down to the consumer, you and me here at home. Andrew.
Elizabeth.
So, they just talked about fracking and natural resources that President Biden, initially in his first term of office, said no to. What are your thoughts on this? That's what I want to know. If you're watching, what do you think are the repercussions of the initial term of office to where fracking and other terms of natural resources were put on standby? I just don't understand really what the purpose of saying that we're going to go to our reserves are. The reserves come from people that frack, that have natural resources, that make a living off of this, but it was a priority to end their jobs. But now it's becoming a dependability. I'm not trying to start a confrontation here. It's just, I understand we have to reserve our natural resources. That is a priority. I agree. It is something that we must do to maintain our Earth, to create healthy and sustainable fuels for our living abilities. However, if we're unable to acknowledge at our current place in the world, society, that we do depend on these type of fossil fuels, but we cannot acknowledge it publicly, then I think we really are at a deniability, and we must acknowledge that there must be a way forward. Elon Musk, has been a rock in the movement forward to go beyond fossil fuels, and I agree with him. I think that we must move forward and find a sustainability in technology that brings us to a stage to where we can sustain Earth and our fossil fuels. But when the news states in a pandemic, which I will state is a war in its own term, that we cannot maintain without fossil fuels, then there is a problem if our administration can acknowledge that we are dependent on fossil fuels. What are your thoughts? Mine are very simple. We must maintain and put a better focus on harnessing our natural resources until we can get to a stage to where we can be independent. This was something I believe in the last administration was a focus, and a very good one. Russia has already undermined the United States and made ties with China. We have broke ties with China as a country. If you think I'm wrong, then tell me why. Please. I would love to know why. Because all the news, which sometimes you cannot, take with a grain of salt, because news is always prone to mistakes. But if we can understand and make a plan for the way forward, then we can overcome obstacles such as natural resources. However, we're at the stage in America, okay, to where if a war breaks out or an invasion in another country, to where a NATO allied force or country is under siege, we fall apart. Look at our stock market. Everything is dropped. If you're an investor, you can look at your stocks right now and see that they have fell to bottom lows. Probably the lowest lows of the last year and a half. Why do I say that? Because I'm an investor. And crypto, for example, it has fell 2 times. 2x down. 200% down from its medium. It is a 5x down almost from its all-time high. However, there's many things that fall into place with that. If you look at the historic value of stocks, crypto, or the NASDAQ, you will see that during times of invasion, Afghanistan, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Korean War, stocks fell to all-time lows, but they also rebounded shortly after, within 2 to 3 months, to 200x, or not 200x, sorry. Take it off record, not financial advice, by the way. I want to make a disclosure here. They have also rebounded 2 to 3x from what they were. Not saying this will, occur the same way, but we have to be prepared because this affects us as a country. And I honestly don't know where to go forward. We have many young Americans that are enlisting in the United States Army, the Marines, the Air Force, the Navy, the Coast Guard, the National Guard, that are serving their country to better themselves, to be something bigger than they are. And our country provides that. We are one of the few countries that provide the most benefits, the most initiatives out of every other country. And I can tell you this, you know why? I am a veteran of the United States Army. I've served over 15 years in the United States Army. And it is tough. However, rewarding. The overall outcome of raising your right hand and committing yourself to something bigger than you are has always been the part of human legacy. Regardless of where you come from, your religion, your race, your creed, it doesn't matter. You become one with who you desire to be. On that note, let's go back to ABC News and get further guidance on what's going on with Ukraine and Russia.
This is Chelsea there in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Let's turn now to ABC News contributor and retired General Robert Abrams. General Abrams was an advisor to former U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel during the last invasion of Ukraine. More recently, was the head of U.S. forces in Korea. Thank you, General. Okay, so U.S. defense officials were expecting this invasion to come tonight under the cover of night. Why this timing? Why in the dark? And was this meant to be a surprise attack?
Well, I think the timing, there's a lot of factors on the timing, and you've touched on a couple of them. Historically and typically, military operations, we like to initiate them under the cover of darkness. The advantage goes to the attacker, and it's when it disrupts people's circadian rhythm. It's disruptive to people's sleep cycles, the Ukrainian military people's sleep cycles, and so forth. So striking during the hours of darkness gives the advantage to the attacker. Why today, I think, is tied to several factors. I think the weather had something to do with it. Weather fairly good today across the country, not as good in the east. But as I've said a number of times, the weather factor swings in both directions. It may not have been ideal for the attacker, but it's not ideal for the defender either. And so I think that was probably a neutral state of play between the attacker and the defender. I think there's some symbolism on starting it today. This is the Russian Army Day of Remembrance. And I think there's in Putin's mind, there was a little symmetry there to be able to initiate this defense of Russian people in eastern Ukraine on the same day. So I think many of those things played into his decision to launch his attack today.
What do you expect the Russian military forces to do in the coming hours? It's just after 6 a.m. in Ukraine. What could morning look like?
Well, look, I think we need to pay attention to what Putin said. What he said was, we're going to do a special military operation to demilitarize Ukraine and denazify Ukraine. So I think we should kind of step back away from the tactics of what we can expect to see. I think he's made a declarative statement that he intends to destroy or completely disarm the Ukrainian military, and it will not be limited to one part of the country. When he says demilitarize, that means destroy or disarm their capability to defend themselves. And then on the denazification, I think that's not a veiled threat. That is a clear, unambiguous threat to the leadership, the elected governmental officials of Ukraine, that he intends to replace them. What we should be asking is, if Putin and Russia is successful, how does this end? How does he put his own government, somebody who is sympathetic to Russia, who will be a puppet for Putin and the Russian regime? How will that play out? But I think he has signaled to Ukraine and signaled to the international community what his true intentions are here.
And let's go back to the aid for Ukraine. How much could the military assets provided by the U.S., like those Javelin missiles, help Ukraine in a conflict with a country like Russia?
So the Javelin missiles and other arms and ammunition that are being provided by other NATO countries will be enormously helpful to the Ukrainian military. But as Steve pointed out earlier, the Ukrainian military is good. They're very good, and they're a lot better than they were in 2014. But unfortunately, size does matter, and numbers do matter when it comes to squaring these two countries up against each other. And Russia has a decisive advantage in a couple of areas. They have it in surface-to-surface missiles. They have it in combat aircraft. They have it in combat helicopters. And that is something that Ukraine just does not have, and it puts them at a military disadvantage. So I suspect and I fully expect that the Ukrainian military will put up a very stiff defense. But we're looking at some very tough days. The amount of firepower that Russia has aligned against the Ukrainian military right now is enormous. And I would expect us to see it completely unleashed here in the next 24 hours.
Some tough days ahead. General Abrams, thank you. Let's bring in former Homeland Security official and ABC News contributor Elizabeth Newman now. Today, Ukraine experienced some smaller scale cyber attacks, but Russia is capable of much larger cyber attacks. Talk about what those could look like.
Right. So today we initially saw some DDoS attacks, those are denial of service attacks, which think about not being able to access your bank or a government website where you need some information. It's disruptive, but it's not really of the size and scale that we expect. But then later this afternoon, we actually got word that some malware had been released. It's a data wipe malware, and it had infected, reports are up to hundreds of computers in Ukraine, and the damage that type of attack can cause could be significant depending on which places were targeted. And what some of the cyber experts are postulating, it's all pretty early to deduce everything, but they think that the DDoS attacks may have been launched to be able to distract from the other activities embedding this malware in networks. So it is very possible and likely that we will see more attacks kind of unfurl over the next few days, and with a particular focus on Ukraine. And the purpose of those is to try to cause more disruption, and in particular damage and disrupt the ability to communicate with the public, as well as to exercise command and control of the military and organizing your response as a government. So I would expect to see more of those. We might also see attacks on infrastructure, taking out the energy grid. They actually did this to Ukraine back in 2015, took out power for about 1 to 6 hours for about 230,000 people. And we know that Russia has pretty significant capabilities, so I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg at this point.
Bringing this full circle, there's serious concern about the prospect of cyber attacks right here in the United States by the Russian government. What is the likelihood that could actually happen?
I think it's pretty significant. You've seen DHS and the Department of Justice actively try to raise the alarm about potential cyber attacks, and they've been doing this for months. They've been putting out bulletins, they've been holding calls with state and local officials, with private businesses, with the banks, anybody that is an owner or operator of critical infrastructure with a particular focus on finance, communications, internet, energy, oil and gas. We are very concerned that those businesses and critical infrastructure are going to be targeted, may already be in the process of being targeted, because of course in the way that cyber warfare is conducted, you often try to infiltrate, plant viruses, plant malware that is quiet and silent, and then you activate it when you need it. So the battlefield has probably already been prepped, and they've been trying to alert everybody to be on the lookout for
So I just want to point out something real quick to everyone. So, ABC News, they're talking about infrastructure, malware, and implementation of cyber breakdown of communication systems. I mean, they cannot confirm or deny that this is happening. However, to insinuate that this is something that could happen in its own is, obviously a warning system, which I think is great, in its own sense. I mean, I think, warning people that this could be a possibility is something that, we should know about. This is something that could help us overall make a decision on our own personal finance or well-being. However, to make accusations on national news or television, however, I don't believe is something that benefits our country overall. Because, I mean, this is my opinion, by the way. If you cannot confirm something or prove its existence, then you should not accuse it of being something that is. That's my opinion, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong. Feel free. But I must say that I do not agree with ABC News. I don't. But you know what? That's the best thing about America. Having your own opinion, right? Let's go on to other topics of the news. So, Ukraine, Russia crisis live news. Putin has launched full-scale invasion, says Ukraine foreign minister latest. Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. There's not much Biden can do to stop the invasion of Ukraine. Wow. Okay. Not much America can do. What the hell? Oh my God.
Hi, my name is Mike Wall with ADG Professionals. I am the President and Chief Operating Officer.
Let's go back live to Ukraine now. Correspondent Steve Harrigan is on the ground in Kyiv.
It's pretty sad.
What is your situation there as morning is coming?
Hey, Shem, looking off to my right here as dawn is just about to break in this capital city of 3 million. And over the last 5 to 10 minutes, we've heard maybe 6 to 8 explosions in rapid succession. Off to my right, a slight orange glow coming up from those explosions. We think they're likely Grad missile attacks, and the targets here in this capital city are command and control. They're trying to hit key communication centers, as well as headquarters, military bases, and airports. The important thing, really, the question at this point, before the sun comes up here and the church bells going off behind me, is what are we seeing? And the real answer is we don't know yet. Putin has said one thing, and another thing has happened on the ground since the start of this crisis weeks ago.
That's how it's been, I think, the whole time.
For Belarus, he didn't. He said he wasn't going to attack Ukraine. He did. So now he's saying this is an attack in Donbass. This is a special operation. He's not even calling it a war.
And only he knows what's going on.
But it's obviously not stopping there. This is bigger than eastern Ukraine because we're hearing explosions here in the capital. But the question mark is what follows these explosions. Is there another explosion off behind me that's due south?
Hopefully not. You got a lot of Kevlar on.
An attempt at regime change. The simple question is Putin going
It's not regime change. He's taking over a portion of Ukraine.
That the capital is a target, and likely the political leadership here will be a target as well. This is the opening salvo. Earlier today we saw cyber attacks, websites hit.
You can't see cyber attacks.
And now we're hearing explosions in the capital.
You can hear explosions, yes.
We know that Ukraine has weapons from the U.S. We know they've gotten hundreds of millions of dollars of weapons, things like Javelin anti-tank missiles at about $175,000 a piece by the dozen.
You have a green screen behind you.
A million-man army. But when it comes to air power, when it comes to air defenses, they are clearly outnumbered. So their only chance...
It's pretty sad when people dress up in a green screen behind them to address the news. That's pretty sad. I have a green screen behind me, by the way. That's why I'm able to do what I do right here.
The focus of the fighting now will be in the east, will be in Donbass. There's 2 breakaway regions there, which Putin has recognized.
Look at how perfectly defined those corners are and everything. That is an image. It's not an actual background, a real-life background. It really irritates me when people try to make news that they're not really there at.
2.5 million people live there. So even if it is just a fight in eastern Ukraine...
Is it just a fight?
Ukraine will fight to hold that territory.
Yeah, of course they will.
Fight to take it, and the West is going to flood Ukraine with weapons to help them fight. No U.S. troops...
Yeah, we've flooded every country in the historic region of our existence to fight.
It's hard to see how that
Look at Afghanistan.
there in eastern Ukraine. Is it coming to the capital? I'm standing here as the sun starts to come up, and I'm wondering, the 30
Are you wondering?
explosions that we've heard, is that the end? Are they just knocking out command and control?
I don't know. Take that green screen out from behind you and go report real news. Go out there and actually show what's happening. Don't put a green screen behind you.
How will Ukrainian citizens react? Certainly many have left. Certainly many will be in their basements. But many...
Will they be in their basements? Sounds familiar.
So this is an incredibly dangerous situation. We're just going to have to keep an eye on it over the next 48 hours.
Keep an eye on it. You should probably get out there to the field and report real news.
Situations, war zones around the world. It is eerie to hear those church bells there as they're making
church bells.
Explosions. You talk about these people and their determination to fight.
What church bells?
Sense that we know they have the determination. Do they have the ability? Do they need? They have what they need to mount any real kind of defense in these cities if it comes to that.
You know, I think in the short term, Ukraine has no chance at all.
Really? Ukraine has no chance.
Every chance in the world. It really depends how this war goes, but I remember...
War? Is it an invasion or is it a war? Is it a war or an invasion? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to know.
10 years later, Russians were still fighting in Chechnya. It's easy to take a city. It's hard to hold a city.
It's not hard to hold a city once you've taken it.
They can carry out regime change. They can decapitate the leadership here.
I swear, the news is all over the place. And I apologize if I offend people. I just, 15 years in the Army, and, you know, listening to some people that are civilians that have never been in service, that have never been in war, yes, it is very frustrating listening to this.
Excellent points. Steve Harrigan, we will check back with you. Thank you very much. Critical to our on-scene reporting and knowing what's going on there. We'll be back.
So Secretary General, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres addressed an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council on Ukraine late Wednesday to deplore Russia's actions toward the country and plead for diplomacy. So earlier in the previous day, United Nations, the emergency UN Security Council meeting was meant as an 11th hour effort to dissuade Russia from sending troops into Ukraine. Obviously, that was a failure, but the message became moot even as it was being delivered. While diplomats and at UN headquarters were making pleas for Russia to back off, give peace a chance, they said. Secretary General Antonio Guterres implored. Russian President Vladimir Putin went on television in his homeland to announce a military operation that he said was intended to protect civilians in Ukraine. Now, Putin warned other countries that any effort to interfere with the Russian operation would lead to consequences they have never seen. This is a very big threat. Consequences they have never seen. Let's look at every country. Let's look at the superpowers. Superpower countries. Let's look at the superpower countries. Threats they have never seen. America. Tell me. What are the threats America has never seen? What is the biggest threat we have ever seen? I don't know. The last threat we had, we threw an atomic bomb at someone. I'm not scared. But maybe I am a little. I don't know what kind of backbone we have right now. The council where Russia holds a rotating presidency this month gathered Wednesday, not hours after Russia said rebels in eastern Ukraine had asked Moscow for military assistance. Fears that Russia was laying the groundwork for bore out about a half hour later. It's too late, my dear colleagues, to speak about de-escalation in Ukraine. Ambassador Sergei Konstantier told the council, I call on every one of you to do everything possible to stop the war. Now, you hear everything about an invasion. But why is everything about war? Why is it about war? Tell me. Why? In a spontaneous exchange not often seen in the council chamber, Kostelia challenged his Russian counterpart to say that his country wasn't at the very moment bombing and shelling Ukraine or moving troops into it. You have a smartphone. You can call officials in Moscow, Kostelia said. I have already said all that I need to at this point. Russian Ambassador Vasilya Nabenzia responded. He added that he didn't plan to wake up Russia's foreign minister and said that what was happening was not a war but a special military operation. Castilla dismissed this description outside the meeting as Luminatic Semitics, meaning it was mediocre. At the council's second emergency meeting this week on Ukraine, members found themselves delivering prepared speeches that were prepared, by the way. I want to quote that. Prepared speeches. Okay? Prepared. Not meaningful. Prepared meaning to blank the audience in a form to where they would understand what they wanted them to understand. That's what's the problem with prepared speeches. At the council's second emergency meeting this week on Ukraine, members found themselves delivering prepared speeches that were instantly updated to tell people what they needed to hear, not what they should hear. Some ultimately reacted in a second round of hostility added remarks. At the exact time as we gathered in the council seeking peace, Putin delivered a message of war. In total disdain for the responsibility of this council, U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield said. She added that a draft resolution would be circulated to the council Thursday. The resolution would declare that Russia is violating the UN Charter, international law, and a 2015 Council resolution in Ukraine, a European diplomat said, speaking on condition of anonymity because the discussions was private. Now let me say, obviously, Russia has already invaded Ukraine. We know this is not what should be happening. President Biden promised support. He promised to be there. But he has withdrew his. Let me repeat this. Look at me. He has withdrew his support, saying he will not intervene. As a member of NATO, and I have served with NATO, I have been a part of NATO in the Afghanistan War, Operation Enduring Freedom. I will just say, because I have to watch what I say, I'm going to be a little bit timely on this. I hope you don't mind. Please don't. I hope you don't mind that I take a moment to make sure my words are correct. A promise given, not fulfilled, is a puzzle never solved and broken, never to be revealed. That's the best way I can put it in a rhyme that's never sealed. But please, try to understand, because you've never been here. Echoing a narrative being broadcast to Russians at home, Nabenzi portrayed his country as responding to the plight of beleaguered people in the breakaway areas. Russia claims Ukraine is engaging in violence and oppression, which Ukraine denies. Okay, let's go ahead and put that out there right now. Ukraine denies that Russia is engaging in violence and oppression. Obviously they are. The root of today's crisis around Ukraine is the actions of Ukraine itself, he told the council Wednesday. Ukraine Foreign Minister Dmytro, I can't even say that name. You can't even hear me. All right. So, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba employed countries to use tough economic sanctions, strong messages, and active diplomacy to get Russia to back off. A lackluster response would jeopardize not only Ukraine, but the concept of international law and global security, he warned. Meeting a day after Western powers and other countries imposed new sanctions, which, by the way, President Joe Biden imposed sanctions way after the fact. Way after, I believe, personally. Please post your comments what you think should have happened. But way after I believe should have happened. I think he should have represented Ukrainian Americans. He should have. He should have represented them. He should have represented their families in Ukraine. He should have. But a meeting a day after Western powers and some other countries imposed new sanctions on Russia, the 193-member General Assembly didn't take any collective action. But the comments from nearly 70 nations, with more scheduled for Monday, represented the broadest forum of global sentiment since the crisis dramatically escalated this week. Way before this happened. Way before the invasion and the war. Because it is declared a war. Don't get it twisted. It's declared a war. Russia seized Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula in 2014. Look back. Look in the past. It's happened before. What's the difference now? What is the difference, you would ask? And then also think about this. Pro-Russia currently, rebels have since been fighting Ukrainian forces in the eastern areas of Donetsk and Luhansk. More than 14,000 people have been killed in the conflict. 14,000. After weeks of rising tension, as Moscow massed over 150,000 troops on Ukraine's borders, Putin on Monday, this past Monday, recognized the two regions' independence and ordered Russian forces that for what he called peacekeeping. Now, I will say this. I heard earlier in the week multiple news agencies reporting peacekeeping missions. Russia and Ukraine. Peacekeeping missions. Why the hell, French, pardon me. Why the hell, not actually, I don't give a shit. Why would you have people coming in your country for peacekeeping missions when you have your own damn country? Unless it's an invasion. Just saying. I'm not the smartest man in the room. I'm really not. I may have a college degree or two. I'm still not the smartest. I may like to be, but I'm not. Anyway, what I'm trying to say. It's not logistically sound. And the fact that we have people reporting in the news that it's a peacekeeping mission blows my mind. The fact we have our government saying it's a peacekeeping mission, it blows my mind. Let me put my mic up a little bit. There we go. Put it down a little bit. Alright. Anyway, blows my mind. Okay? And for anyone that believes this is a peacekeeping mission, please respond and say it's a peacekeeping mission. If you're watching right now, put a comment. Please put a comment in. Subscribe. Because I'm going to be here 10 years from now. Wouldn't you like to be a first subscriber? I don't know. I would be. Anyway, let's keep going. Because this is irritating me more than it's irritating you. I promise. President Putin in the name of humanity, bring your troops back to Russia. The Secretary General said in remarks to reporters, in the name of humanity, do not allow to start in Europe what could be the worst war since the beginning of the century. Wow. His own country saying that. But this is declared a war now. This is declared a war. Look at the news. The stock market's tanked. It's over. Right? That's what everyone says.
All eyes on the tensions between.
Let's watch this video from the COVID Ukraine ISP Boris Johnson using crisis to stem unpopularity. I'm curious about this. Let's see how people are twisting the war to their own benefit. Let's watch that. Because this is what war is. People using it to their own benefit.
Between Russia and the West over the Ukraine crisis. Nonetheless, the trouble looks like a disguised relief for British Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
Johnson's premiership is in peril as police are investigating a series of lockdown breaching parties in Downing Street. Just 3 weeks ago, the Prime Minister was ridiculed on the world stage. He was mocked by the White House for his lockdown-busting parties in Downing Street. But as the fear of invasion by Russia grew, Johnson was keen to take a leading role among his allies in confronting Russia over Ukraine. His active response to the Ukraine crisis helped him. Detractors have accused Boris Johnson of using a foreign mess to evade domestic woes. The British Prime Minister stands accused by opposition parties of seeking to distract public attention. An internal inquiry found Johnson's staff had enjoyed alcohol-fueled parties, with the British leader attending a few of the events himself. Police are investigating 12 gatherings held at Downing Street. Johnson has repeatedly been asked if he would resign. In the latest interview with the BBC, Johnson refused to answer whether he would resign if found to have broken COVID-19 lockdown laws. With his leadership at stake, Johnson is set to announce an end to all pandemic legal curbs in England. Johnson will address Parliament to outline his plan as he insists it is time to move on. Under the Living with COVID plan, the government intends to end a legal requirement for COVID-infected people to self-isolate. Johnson is ready to press ahead despite political opposition and unease from the World Health Organization. The plan will be in effect this week. Local authorities will be required to manage further outbreaks with pre-existing legal powers. Free COVID testing for the general public is expected to be phased out. An internal poll at National Health Service Confederation showed a large majority of its members were opposed to ending self-isolation and free tests. Remember, the UK has suffered one of the world's worst per capita death tolls in the pandemic. Public outcry over the Partygate scandal has left Johnson fighting for political survival. Several members of parliament from his Conservative Party have publicly called for his resignation, although he denies any wrongdoing. Johnson has submitted a written response to police questions about parties held over the past 2 years. Johnson has already apologized in Parliament for the gatherings identified in an official inquiry. WeOn is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.
I gather, just as I came into this press conference, that Vladimir Putin has effectively announced that Russia is recognizing the breakaway republics of Donetsk and Lugansk. This is plainly in breach of international law. It's a violation, a flagrant violation of the sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine. It is a repudiation of the Minsk process and the Minsk agreements, and I think it's a very ill omen and a very dark sign. And it certainly does not seem to me that it's certainly an indication, yet another indication, that things are moving in the wrong direction in Ukraine. The UK will continue to do everything we can to stand by the people of Ukraine, with a very robust package of sanctions, as you know, fortifying the eastern flank of NATO in all the ways that we have, but also being one of the few countries to have given the Ukrainians the defensive, I stress defensive, weaponry that we think is appropriate to their needs. And we will continue to think about what more we can do to support Ukraine in what is clearly a very, very dark and difficult time.
These may be the opening shots of a war that could tear up the map of Europe. Russian-backed separatists fighting in a largely ignored conflict for 8 years against the Ukrainian government have dramatically stepped up artillery and mortar attacks, firing on houses seemingly at random in government-held areas. Villagers tell us Ukrainian forces are firing back. Roman Yanukovych, a security guard at a fish cannery, says he'd just left his house when an artillery round exploded. It came, he says, from the separatist areas. But over the fields in separatist territory, the mirror is twisted. The separatists say they are facing an unprovoked and merciless assault by the Ukrainian army and gangs of saboteurs. Ukraine denies it's launched an offensive and accuses the separatists of manufacturing a crisis to give Russia an excuse to invade. The separatists, around 2 million, have ordered a mass evacuation for Russia. But some residents of the separatist areas told reporters they didn't know why they'd been brought to Russia, complaining they'd been dumped there without food or a place to stay. Russian media accused the Ukrainian government of carrying out a genocide against Russian speakers in Ukraine. And in yet another show of force, President Vladimir Putin this weekend personally oversaw readiness tests of his country's vast nuclear arsenal. U.S. officials say President Biden said he expects Russia will invade within days because U.S. intelligence indicates President Putin has given his commanders the go-ahead. On the front lines, Ukrainian Lieutenant Colonel Andrei Baklan pointed out separatist positions. Baklan fought for the Soviet Union as a young soldier and hated it. He doesn't want to live under what he calls Putin's dictatorship.
We don't know what's coming. How do you think this ends?
Good always triumphs over evil, he says. But if this starts, many people will die on both sides, and many civilians. But as Churchill showed, in the end, there will be victory.
For now, it seems the Ukrainian forces and the Russian-backed separatists are testing each other, firing artillery, responding with artillery, firing mortars, but without advancing and taking territory. But an escalation here, Chanel, could quickly spread.
It's a scary situation. Richard, thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Find your favorite recipes, celebrity interviews, uplifting stories, shop our favorite deals, and so much more.
Well, let's get up to date on what's going on right now with Ukraine and the news across the world. Currently, we already got the broadcast from ABC News on what's going on and the stock market, everything from the stock market to troops on the ground to Ukraine and diplomacy with the United States of America and President Joe Biden. Let's hear it straight from breaking news. Pentagon official Russian invasion of Ukraine underway.
Suspicious activity, shields up, as they say. But from an American citizen standpoint, what does this mean for us? It could mean that we see disruptions. You remember that we had the Colonial Pipeline attack. It was a ransomware attack, a little bit different than probably what we would see in this circumstance. But it didn't take much. It didn't take much to shut down that pipeline, and disruptions to gas supplies occurred pretty quickly. Prices went up, and then there were parts of the country where there were lines and people had to wait for the gas tank to come and fill up the station in order for them to fill up their cars. So those types of disruptions are very plausible, and we saw Putin kind of threaten that tonight. I do wonder if his threat to the U.S. and to the West, that we may, if we involve ourselves in some way, we might see attacks of the like that we haven't ever seen in our history before. That could be a reference to cyber warfare. We really have not seen the full scale of what it would look like for the United States and Russia to go head-to-head from a cyber perspective, because, of course, if they attack us, we have some offensive capability as well. We would likely retaliate, and where does that go? So the world's never seen that, and that is that's a little disturbing. I think I know that the people in the United States government that manage those capabilities are very mindful of the precedent that entering into cyber conflict may set and the dangers that might pose. But we will see how Russia chooses to handle itself.
A lot more to monitor. ABC News contributor Elizabeth Newman, thank you. And now we want to check back in with former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. Thank you for joining us again. Now, in a statement, the White House said that the president plans to deliver remarks tomorrow announcing further consequences for Russia. What could those further consequences be?
Andrew, he could pull out all the stops, and he should pull out all the stops. This is a major violation of Ukrainian sovereignty, major violation of international law, major invasion of a sovereign nation, in violation of everything that has kept the peace for all this time. And we have been very clear. President Biden has been very clear. The allies have been very clear that if he does this, if President Putin does this, which he has now done, that we will throw all of these sanctions and all of these export bans at him. And so I would imagine that we will see the maximum level of sanctions against top Russian banks, maybe SWIFT, maybe against the Russian central bank. This is a nuclear option in financial sanctions, is the Russian central bank. I would imagine, and I would hope, that all of these would be on the table. All of these not only on the table, would be implemented. Now is the time. President Putin has done what we said we didn't want him to do, and if he did, we were going to sanction him at the top level. At the top level, we should go to the top level of that escalation.
Now, I want to play you a dramatic moment, end of the UN Security Council meeting that just wrapped. It was a Ukrainian ambassador addressing his Russian counterpart. Take a listen.
There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell, Ambassador.
What's your reaction to that?
He's absolutely right. This is a war crime. The number of civilians and military who will die because of what Mr. Putin has ordered will be enormous. Will be thousands, tens of thousands. Unprovoked attack on a nation, a sovereign nation, on Putin's border, killing thousands of civilians and military. This is a war crime. The ambassador is absolutely right. President Putin will go down with other war criminals, like in the past century, who ordered attacks on innocent people, who ordered attacks on nations on their borders. President Putin will go down with that club, with that group of people, that group of war criminals.
Now that we're here, this crisis has been building for weeks. Do you think the United States and NATO allies did enough in terms of sanctions, in your opinion, beforehand to try and prevent what just happened here tonight?
So the NATO allies and the United States took a lot of steps before this happened, and that was a good thing. They moved a lot of troops. They moved a lot of units from the United States to Eastern Europe. They moved a lot of U.S. forces from from Germany, from parts of Europe into the eastern flank of NATO. Those were active steps, active deterrence. That was an attempt to deter President Putin from what he's done today. So that deterrence has now failed. And now we go into exacting the price. We said we're
So check this out. This is live, y'all.
Незамедлительных действий. Народная Республика Донбасс обстоятельства требуют от нас решительных и незамедлительных действий. Народная Республика Донбасс обратились к России с просьбой о помощи. В связи с этим, в соответствии со статьей 51 части 7 Устава ООН, санкции Совета Федерации России и во исполнение ратифицированных Федеральным собранием 22 февраля сего года договоров о дружбе и взаимопомощи с Донецкой Народной Республикой и Луганской Народной Республикой, мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции. Ее цель – защита людей, которые на протяжении 8 лет подвергаются издевательствам, геноциду со стороны киевского режима. Кто бы ни пытался помешать нам, а тем более создать угрозы для нашей страны, для нашего народа, должны знать, что ответ России будет незамедлительным и приведет вас к таким последствиям, с которыми вы в своей истории еще никогда не сталкивались. Мы готовы к любому развитию событий.
It's pretty crazy when you look at some of the tweets that come across Twitter that they allow with an invasion like this or this. It's pretty sad because people are losing their lives. How can Twitter allow this? I hope I don't get banned for saying that. But it's pretty sad. It's pretty sad for the person that... Let's see. This guy right here. Or girl. Whatever. It's pretty sad that they find humor out of this. I bet if they were there, they would not find humor out of that.
Good morning. Early this morning, Russian troops invaded Ukraine, a free and sovereign country. And once again, in the center of Europe, innocent women, men and children are dying of fear for their lives. We condemn this barbaric attack and the cynical arguments to justify it. It is President Putin who is bringing war back to Europe. And in these dark hours, the European Union and its people stand by Ukraine and its people. We are facing an unprecedented act of aggression by the Russian leadership against a sovereign, independent country. Russia's target is not only Donbass. The target is not only Ukraine. The target is the stability in Europe and the whole of the international peace order. And we will hold President Putin accountable for that. Later today, we will present a package of massive and targeted sanctions to European leaders for approval. With this package, we will target strategic sectors of the Russian economy by blocking their access to technologies and markets that are key for Russia. We will weaken Russia's economic base and its capacity to modernize. And in addition, we will freeze Russian assets in the European Union and stop the access of Russian banks to European financial markets. Like with the first package of sanctions, we are closely aligned with our partners and allies, the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, but also, for example, Japan and Australia. These sanctions are designed to take a heavy toll on the Kremlin's interests and their ability to finance war. And we know that millions of Russians do not want war. President Putin is trying to turn the clock back to the times of the Russian Empire. But in doing so, he is putting at risk the future of the Russian people. I call on Russia to immediately stop the violence and to withdraw its troops from Ukraine's territory. We will not let President Putin tear down the security architecture that has given Europe peace and stability over many decades. We will not allow President Putin to replace the rule of law by the rule of force and ruthlessness. He should not underestimate the resolve and strength of our democracies. And history has proven that societies and alliances built on trust and freedom are resilient and successful. And that's exactly what the autocrats fear. The European Union stands with Ukraine and its people. We will continue to support them. Ukraine will prevail. Thank you.
These are among the darkest hours for Europe since the end of World War II. A major nuclear power has attacked a neighbor country and is threatening reprisals of any other states that may come to its rescue. This is not only the greatest violation of international law, it's a violation of the basic principles of human coexistence. It's costing many lives with unknown consequences ahead of us. The European Union will respond in the strongest possible terms. President of the European Council, President Michel, has called for a meeting of the European Council this evening, and they will agree and provide political guidance to adopt the stronger package, the harshest package of sanctions we have ever implemented. As High Representative for the Foreign Affairs and Security Policy of the European Union, I will be in touch with our partners around the world to ensure the international community will be fully grasping the gravity of the moment and to call strongly and united on Russia to cease immediately this behavior, intolerable behavior, and Russian leadership will face unprecedented isolation. This is not a question of blocks. This is not a question of diplomatic power games. It's a matter of life and death. It's about the future of our global community. And we will stand united with our transatlantic partners and with all European nations in defending this position. We stand united in saying that no violence and destruction as means to obtain political gains. We, the European Union, remain the stronger group of nations in the world, and this should not be underestimated. More immediately, we will be designing urgent assistance to Ukraine in this dire situation. We will also be active in supporting evacuations operations, including of our own staff in zones affected by this Russian attack. The European Union, together with transatlantic and like-minded partners, have made unprecedented efforts to achieve a diplomatic solution to the security crisis caused by Russia. But Russia has not reciprocated these efforts and instead has opted unilaterally for a grave and premeditated escalation conducting to war. President Putin needs to stop this senseless aggression. And today our thoughts are with the people of Ukraine. We will stand with them.
It's pretty sad when you see images like this and memes and Twitter making fun of people in Ukraine. I really don't know how else to put it. I really don't know how else to put it. Maybe this shows where we are as a nation. But let's look. Who is this person? Hmm. 3,386 followers, falling over 4,000. Let's look a little bit deeper. Be careful who you trust and tell your problems to. Everyone who smiles at you is not your friend. This is God making fun of Ukraine and the people suffering. India. It's sad. People like that exist. If they had to deal with those problems, then maybe, I don't know, maybe they'd see it different. Sorry I said that people like that exist. I don't mean it in a term that says they shouldn't. It just, maybe 3,800 and some people wouldn't like to see that post. I don't know. Live footage of NATO hitting Russia with their most severe sanctions for their actions against Ukraine. Curious about this. Water gun. Okay. That's some serious shit right there. Alright, Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Russian invasion. Serious shit right there. So, the new pick, let's look at this guy right quick. 77 followers, so, yeah. See this right here? This is a newer account. He probably made this shit in the last day. Can't count on nothing, he says. He's just trying to get followers. That's pretty sad. He uses a war to do that. Pretty sad. Whatever. That's not Ukraine. This is actually a pretty serious post. Someone that actually has news. Good job. President Putin warns that if other countries interfere with Russia's attack on Ukraine, they will be met with consequences they have never experienced in their history.
И приведет вас к таким последствиям, с которыми вы в своей истории, кто бы не пытался помешать нам, а тем более создать угрозы для нашей страны, для нашего народа, должны знать, что ответ России будет незамедлительным и приведет вас к таким последствиям, с которыми вы в своей истории еще никогда не сталкивались. Кто бы не пытался помешать нам, а тем более создать угрозы для нашей страны, для нашего народа, должны знать, что ответ России будет незамедлительным и приведет вас к таким последствиям, с которыми вы в своей истории еще никогда не сталкивались. Кто бы не пытался помешать нам, а тем...
It's pretty scary when a supreme leader of a superpower says any country, regardless of who you are, will be met with extreme prejudice that you have never seen before. That is a threat among all countries. And he had no problem saying it. Putin, Israel, China, North Korea, Trump, Biden, whatever it says, I don't know. It's garbage. Russia's latest Ukraine move offers Biden's last chance at world leadership. The longer Biden waits, the greater the risk that Putin will move more military forces on the rest of Ukraine. Let's watch the news broadcast by Fox. Contributor joined America's newsroom to discuss how the Biden administration has handled the Russian and Ukraine conflict as tensions heighten.
This is the Tony Box, a magical little speaker for kids. And this is a Tony. Tonys are filled with stories and songs that...
And former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, we really appreciate you being here with us this morning as we try to make sense of all of it. I want to just flash back to one thing that President Biden said at his press conference that caused a lot of commotion at the time. This is about an incursion. Watch.
It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera. But if they actually do what they're capable of doing with the force amassed on the border, it is going to be a disaster for Russia if they further invade Ukraine.
Yesterday, Putin ordered troops into the region. And the White House, it seems like the response, even though it was supposed to be quite robust, was very timid. And then you had this splitting of hairs and this question about what Russia actually did yesterday. Do you see what Russia did yesterday afternoon as a minor incursion or an invasion?
Dana, this is angels on the head of a pin. Thanks for you and Bill having me on this morning. The administration has been so muddled in the way they have made Vladimir Putin have the upper hand throughout this entire time. Every time Putin acts, we are on our back foot. He has no fear of the United States of America and a response that we might take. He can see even this morning he's now not moved peacekeeping troops in, but moved in his tanks. And we abandoned Ukraine with our diplomats, but apparently that's not enough to support the Ukrainian people. This has been a model of how, when you fail at deterrence, when you fail to demonstrate the resolve necessary to protect things that matter not only to the Ukrainian people and not only to Eastern Europe, but to the people of the United States of America, when you aren't prepared to defend those things that matter most, then the bad guys in the world will begin to do precisely what you're seeing Vladimir Putin start today.
So for 4 years, Democrats said that Donald Trump was in awe of Vladimir Putin, and Joe Biden was one of them. Lay out for us what a proper deterrence would have been if you believe you could have stopped Putin when you were in office.
Well, Bill, I can say this. The only thing that has changed in the last 14 months is the leadership in the United States of America. We've all known Vladimir Putin a long time. I spent a great deal of time with him and his lieutenants. He hasn't changed. His vision for reinstating the greater Soviet Union and creating a sphere of influence was precisely the same for the 4 years that I was in office alongside President Trump. We were determined to convince him that there were things he could not do. And we put lots of sanctions on him, but where we could work with him, we could. We had a model for engagement and deterrence that stopped him from doing precisely what you're seeing happen this morning.
But again, what could or would have stopped him?
Well, we stopped him with an idea that said the United States is going to protect the things that matter. This is the very concept of strategic deterrence. Today, these are things President Biden could have done. We could have stopped Nord Stream 2 months ago. It was much further away from completion. They could have begun to put real sanctions in place. I saw what the president signed last night. I must say, Vladimir Putin saw them put sanctions for those two parts of Ukraine, and he viewed that as a green light for continued aggression. We could begin to have NATO move forces to Estonia and Lithuania and Latvia to protect those countries. We could have rallied the West and Europe to say that these are the things that we will do together. They've been unable to do each of those, or perhaps haven't been interested or focused elsewhere. And then, Bill, I'll add one more thing. It's not just about this place with Russia and Ukraine, right? The Russians confront us in Syria. Xi Jinping's watching what's happening here as well. So is Chairman Kim. Each time we fail to demonstrate American resolve, whether it is the debacle that was Afghanistan that caused 13 Americans to perish as we exited, those are the kind of things that convince people like Vladimir Putin that his dream of recreating the Soviet Union is something he may well be able to do under this leadership's watch here in the United States.
Mr. Secretary, they spent a lot of time, the administration, trying to tell us that NATO has never been more united, that this has really focused the mind. But yet this morning I see that even Italy, when it comes to sanctions, is saying, well, actually, we're not sure. We're going to take a look as long as it doesn't have to do with energy. The energy policy that the Europeans decided on a couple of decades ago has turned out to be a disaster. Do you think NATO hangs together here?
I'm counting on it. It must. This is, in the first instance, a challenge to the European order, the European system. Certainly the Eastern European countries need countries like France and Germany and Italy to come in to support them in their time of need, this time when there's a real security interest. Putin has bigger plans. He has more aggression in mind, and it will take a united Europe to lead the effort to confront that. And Dana, one last thought on energy. The other thing that we did in the Trump administration is we made sure that the European countries knew that American energy would be produced, it would be affordable, and we were happy to provide it to them. This administration came in and shut that down immediately. I'm sure that the European countries realize now an American energy source, whether it was oil and crude and gas flowing from the United States to the Keystone Pipeline or wherever, probably wasn't going to be available to them, and they engaged in activities that protected their energy interests. You're going to see higher gas prices here in the United States. Farmers in Kansas are going to see higher fertilizer prices because that energy cost will go up. This has real impacts at home here, Dana, and is something that the President Biden has failed to protect us against.
Sir, thank you for your time. Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks for coming on today.
Appreciate it.
It's pretty sad when we got former heads of state, like, I don't even know what to call it anymore. Like, who's what? We don't know what to believe. Let's replay it.
Mike Pompeo, we really appreciate you being here with us this morning as we try to make sense of all of it. I want
to confront that. And Dana, one probably wasn't going to be available to them, and they engaged in activities that protected their energy at home here, Dana, and is something that the President Biden has failed to protect us against.
Sir, thank you for your time. Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State.
Europe to lead the effort to confront that. And Dana, one last thought on energy. For instance, a challenge to the European order would be produced, Keystone Pipeline or wherever, probably wasn't going to be available to them, and they engaged in activities that protected their energy interests. You're going to see higher gas prices here in the United States. Farmers in Kansas are going to see higher fertilizer prices because that energy cost will go up. This has real impacts at home here, Dana, and is something that the President Biden has failed to protect us against.
Sir, thank you for your time. Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Dana.
For coming on today.
Appreciate it.
There's art, and then there's
nobody
Hillary
cares
to run
about,
again is
no,
a setup.
let's be honest, nobody cares about what's happening to the Uyghurs, okay? You bring it up because you really
What?
care, and I think
What do
that's
you mean
nice that
nobody
you care.
cares?
The rest of us don't care. I'm just telling you a very...
Democratic Party of the 1970s.
It's going to be only America first. America first.
Today, isolationism from the left or right is an absurdity.
Apparently, to deter Vladimir Putin.
Today, China sends warplanes towards Taiwan to test the U.S.'s resolve, while non-stop cyber attacks plague the mainland from foreign entities.
This is the reality, and we should assume, and businesses should assume, that these attacks are here to stay, and if anything, will intensify.
And following a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, is it any surprise that just 35% approve of Mr. Biden's foreign policy performance, according to the latest Quinnipiac poll?
The mistakes, the low points of the Biden presidency have actually been the president's own mistakes.
Now more than ever, we need a coherent, proactive, forward-leaning response, an actual foreign policy.
I intend to search for peace along two parallel paths: deterrence and arms reductions.
Today, much can be learned from Reagan's retreat from isolationism in the 1980s.
Unless we demonstrate the will to rebuild our strength, the Soviets have little incentive to negotiate.
Still, there is that pertinent question: who cares about the Uyghurs, or Hong Kong, or Taiwan?
If you're asking me, do I care about a segment of a class of people in another country? Not until we can take care of ourselves will I prioritize them over us.
Mr. Palihapitiya's point was antiseptically progressive, one that Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, or few Democrats would disagree with. Any money not spent on national security or defense can be reprogrammed into open spigot domestic spending programs. That's the world they care about. In contrast, Reagan unveiled a deliverable plan to strengthen America against adversaries.
Let us assume the Soviets' rate of spending remains at the level they followed since the 1960s. The blue line is the United States. If my defense proposals are passed, it will still take 5 years before we come close to the Soviet level. Yet the modernization of our strategic and conventional forces will assure that deterrence works and peace prevails.
Entangling alliances, Fortress America, that is history. Today we need to spend more resources not to make war, but to build a credible multi-front deterrent, which is to say the opposite of Joe Biden's Build Back Better.
I just don't think they have a plan going forward.
The aviation industry has come together to get people out into the world.
So, you've seen quite a few different things right now. Different videos talking about the political spectrum to the current state of Ukraine and the invasion of Putin into Ukraine. My question is, where do you stand? What's your opinion? Senator Gabbard, Ukraine conflict avoidable if U.S. had recognized Russia's concerns about Ukraine's NATO entry. Curious about this. Tulsi Gabbard, sanctions don't work. They only punish the American people. Let's hear what she has to say.
Tulsi Gabbard is one of the few people in the Democratic Party who saw this coming and was excoriated for it. She's a former congresswoman from Hawaii. She joins us. Congresswoman, thanks so much for coming on. So I'm just trying to think, because I think it's a fair question as an American, what's in this for me and my neighbors and the rest of us? And all I'm getting is that we can feel morally satisfied because we hate Putin. Is there something that I'm missing?
No, I don't think you're missing anything. The reality is that these sanctions don't work, whether they were put in before or now or later. These sanctions don't work. What we do know is that they will increase suffering and hardship for the American people. And this is the whole problem with the Biden administration. They are so focused on how do we punish Putin that they don't care and are not focused on what is actually in the best interests of the American people. So when Biden stands there and looks directly into the camera and says, you know, defending freedom will cost us, what he really should be saying is looking directly into the American people's eyes and saying, this will cost you, because these sanctions are not going to cost him or Kamala Harris or the power elite in this country, even the power elite in Russia. It is the people who will suffer, the American people, the Russian people, people here at home working hard every single day, facing those drastically increasing prices at the gas pump, facing increasing costs at the supermarket, impacting our supply chain. The hardships that people are dealing with every day now, with Biden's sanctions plan, we're only going to see that continuing to get worse. And it doesn't end there, Tucker. This is the problem is you think Russia's not going to respond? You think Putin's not going to respond? He will respond. And it's likely he'll retaliate using cyber attacks on our financial systems, our communication systems, on our basic infrastructure. Biden will then be forced to respond. Putin will then be forced to respond. So we end up in this endless tit for tat that leads us where? To this looming threat and likelihood of this thing going nuclear. And again, this is the reality that we all need to understand is true, is that whether it is intentional or unintentional, when you have two great nuclear armed countries at this point of escalation, and then if there is a nuclear attack, the power elite, these people are going to go hide in their bunkers. They'll have their shelter. They'll have their food and water and everything that they need. You and I and the American people, we will be left out to deal with the consequences, to suffer and deal with that destruction and death that will come as a result.
And yet we're doing this for principle. The people in charge who don't care at all about our founding documents, who violate their spirit and letter every day, are telling us that an essential American principle is at stake. Do you have any idea what that principle might be?
That therein lies the hypocrisy, Tucker, is they're saying we are doing this in the defense of freedom, in the defense of democracy, but these are the very same people who are working to undermine our own freedoms and our own democracy right here at home. I have a hard time seeing how they actually say these things with a straight face to the American people when they clearly don't care about these principles right here at home. They don't care about defending them. They don't care about the well-being of the American people.
I think that's all very clear, and I appreciate your saying it as clearly as you did. Tulsi Gabbard joining us tonight. Thank you very much. It's interesting when people tell you who you're required to be mad at. You've got a right to think for yourself. You should be mad at the people who are making your life worse, who are preventing you from saying what you think is true, who are calling you a racist for no justification, only to hurt you, who are destroying your children's education, who are allowing your country to become polluted and overrun and filled with drugs and the homeless. Maybe you should be mad at them.
Well, that's an update from the current Ukraine crisis. Stay updated and tune in, subscribe, and tomorrow, later today, I will be on updating everyone with the current Ukraine status. Also, I will be going over other financials, etc. with the crypto market. So, thank you for tuning in. Have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good morning. And most of all, be you.